What's up guys, welcome back to another tutorial video. Today I'm going to be showing you how you can create a mobile application in Flutter and make an HTTP request to an API. So in this tutorial I'm going to be making a request to the API we created in the last tutorial series using the Django REST framework, but this will work for any API that you want to call. So here's an example of what that will look like. We are making the request and we are getting back data such as the post title, the post content, and the author, and we are displaying it in our mobile application in a nice UI. So if this is something that you want to learn how to do, stick around and I'll show you how to build it. So the first thing that you are going to want to do is actually download and install Flutter. So I'm not going to go over how to do that in this video. I actually wrote an article on it that's published on Medium. I will link that in the description. So if you don't have Flutter installed, definitely click that, check it out, and install it on your machine first, and then come back. If you do have Flutter installed, we can jump right into it. So inside your terminal, we're going to simply create a new Flutter app in the directory of your choice. So I'm going to do Flutter create, and I'm going to call this blog app tutorial. And that will create a new Flutter project for us. Okay, when that finishes, I'm going to cd into my app. And when I list everything out, as you see, we get the standard starter files. And I'm going to run this right away just to make sure everything is working and so we can see what we have created. So I will use the command flutter run to do that. Okay, and there we go. We are brought to the standard Flutter home screen where we can click the button and it increases the count. So we are good to go. So I'm going to stop this and I'm simply going to open up this code in my text editor, which is Visual Studio Code. Okay, so inside my text editor, the first thing that we're going to do is open up main.dart, that is inside lib, and main.dart. Now what I'm going to do is simply remove all of the code in here, and we're going to start from scratch. So the first thing to do is import the necessary packages that we need. So we're going to say import package flutter / material.dart, and we are also going to import package http / http.dart, and this will allow us to make the HTTP request to our API. I'm going to import that as HTTP, just like that. Now we're getting an error, and that's because we need to add this into our pubspec.yaml file as a dependency. So I'm going to go inside here, open up pubspec.yaml, and go down to where the dev dependencies are. And right underneath here, I'm going to say HTTP, and I'm going to put the latest version, which for me is 0.12.0 0+2, just like that. Now when we go back here, after this reloads, we shouldn't have an issue. There we go. Flutter pub get is running, and now there's no error. And above here, I'm going to add two more packages. We're going to say import dart :async. We need that for our asynchronous requests. And then I'm going to say import dart : convert, and this will help us converting the JSON response. So that's all the imports we need. So next I'm going to write void main arrow run app, and then I'll pass in my app in here, just like that. And then we need to make that class. We'll say class my app, and that will extend stateful widget, just like that. And it's giving us an error here because we need to implement the missing method of stateful widget. So for that, I'm going to write my app. We'll pass in key. I'm going to say colon, then we'll call super key colon key. And then down here, we will create our override. Oops. And we will say underscore my app state, create state, arrow notation, underscore my app state, and spell that correctly. And now underneath here, we need to create another class, which will be named my app state, and then that will extend the state of my app, just like that. Do the braces, and then inside of here, we can say at override, and we will have our void function init state. And in here, we will make a reference to the my app with super dot init state. Okay, that's looking good so far. And then we're getting an error here because we are not implementing the build method. So right underneath here, we're going to drop down and we are going to create another override. And we will say widget build. And in here, we can pass in our context. So we can say build context, context, and open braces like that. Now, no more errors. All right, so this is good. And then inside of here, we can return what we want to return. So for now, we can return a material app, and we can give this app a title. We'll say blog, and we can give it a theme. We'll say theme data. We'll give it a primary swatch of blue, so that will be colors.blue, just like that. And then now we need the home. We'll say scaffold, and then inside of here, we'll make an app bar, pass an app bar, and we'll just say title is equal to blog. Can't be equal to that, it has to be equal to a text widget, and then blog. There we go. Let's format that. And then right underneath here, we can say body, and we'll just say center. And we'll pass in a child, and we will say text hello. Format that up, and now when we run this, we should have a simple stateful widget that has a title of blog, and it has a text hello in the middle here. Okay, so when I refresh that, I'm getting an error. It says cannot resolve this package HTTP. And if you go back here, it's imported correctly, so that leads me to believe that it is an error with the pubspec.yaml file. So let's go back here. Yes, so I accidentally added this in dev dependencies, but we don't want it there. So copy it, and we want it right here underneath dependencies. So paste it right there. And now when we run this again, we should be good. Perfect. So now we are all good, and as you see, we have our title blog with our standard blue color switch, and we have our hello text in the middle. So the next thing to do is actually start adding the code that will enable us to make the HTTP request. So first we need to look at what the response will look like, because what we're going to do is we need to make the request, but we need to store that as a Dart object. So we need a Dart class that will hold the JSON data. And to do that, we need to know what data we're getting. So I'm in my local host right now. I'm running my Django REST API. And if you're following along with that, you can run this as well, but if you're using your own data, it still applies. So I'm going to go to posts, and this is the data that we eventually want to pull. And if you notice, when I go over here, we can get the JSON. This is what the data looks like. For now, though, I'm going to focus on getting one single post, because you're going to notice getting the list of the posts is actually a little more complicated than getting a single post, because the JSON is structured a bit differently. So if I go to this post, for example, post with ID 6, and I go up here and I get the JSON. This is what the JSON that we will be getting back looks like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this. I'm going to come down here to our project and just make an untitled file. I'm going to go down here. We're going to say JSON, and I'm going to paste this in here. So this is what the data looks like. We have the braces, and then we have our information that we want. So this is the most basic form of JSON that you can get, and it's the easiest and simplest form to work with. So all we need to do is make a request to this URL, and we want the title, we want the content, and we want the author. So we can make a Dart class post with these three variables. So back in our main.dart, right underneath these imports, I'm going to say class post, and inside of here, we're going to define the title, the content, and the author. And I'm going to grab the ID as well. So we can say final int ID, right? Because that is an integer. And then the rest are strings. So we'll say final string title, final string content, and final string author. Now it's giving us an error because we need a constructor as well. So we'll say post, and then in here we can pass in each of these variables using the this keyword. So we can say this.id, comma, this.title, this.content, and this.author. Now there are no errors. Make sure to add the semicolon at the end of that constructor. Now the last thing to do is we want to deserialize this data from JSON to our Dart object. So we can do this using what's called the factory that Dart gives us, or that Flutter gives us. We can say post.fromJSON, and we're going to map the string, comma, dynamic. We'll name this JSON. And then inside of here, what we can do is simply return post. Inside of here, it is, as you can see, it's giving us the 4 things that we have up here. So you need to map each of these to their corresponding JSON result. So we can say ID colon JSON brackets ID, because this right here corresponds to this. And we can do the same for title, content, and author. I'll add my semicolon, and then I'll say comma, title. Okay, just like that. That's all we need for this class post. Now we can actually make the request and handle that. So again, I'm going to come up above here, and I'm going to say future of type post, fetch post, which will be our method that we're creating, and this will be async, an asynchronous method, just like that. Now we want a response, so we'll call that final response, and then that will be equal to await, because this is an asynchronous method. And then we can use our http.get, and as you see, this is prompting us to pass in the URL, and for us, that will be a string with this information right there, just like that, semicolon at the end. And now this response is grabbing this URL. Now down here, we can say if response dot, and we have a couple different methods. We have a couple different options here. We can get the status code. So when we request it, if the status code is equal to 200, which is a successful GET request, we can return post dot from JSON. We can pass in JSON dot decode response dot body. So if we get the data, deserialize it. And it's deserializing it using this. And then else, if we didn't get 200 response, something is wrong. So we want to just throw an exception. And we can just say failed to load the post. Okay, just like that. So now what we can do, we have that. We can come down here into our init state, and we can simply call that fetch post method. So we can say future post is equal to fetch post, just like that. So now all I have left, we have the data, we just have to display the data now. So down here where we have body is returning this center widget and then child text widget, we're going to replace this child with future builder, and that will be of type post. And then that does not take this string anymore, but instead this takes a couple different arguments. So we can say future is equal to this future post, comma, builder is equal to context, comma, snapshot. And the snapshot is what is holding our data. So now in here we can access the data. And this future post up here, I forgot we need to, right above here, this doesn't have a type. So what we're going to do is inside of this myAppState class, we can simply say future post. So of type class post. Then we can call this future post. Now we can assign it to this method, and we can grab it down here as the future of our future builder. Now inside of here we can access all of the information. So if we want, we can say snapshot dot data dot, and as you see, we get the author, content, ID, and title. But we want to do some error checking here as well, and then display them as widgets. So I'm going to say if snapshot dot, and we can say has data, so if there's data, display it, and then else if snapshot dot has error, we want to return that error message. So we can say return a text widget, and we can say $ snapshot dot error. Make sure that is inside this. There we go. And then finally, else. If we get here, that means the data is still loading, so we want to convey that to the user. We can do that by returning a circular progress indicator widget, just like that. And the reason we have this else if snapshot has error is if there is an error and we didn't have this, it would simply return this progress indicator indefinitely. That would never go away because we don't have any data, but we're not tracking if there's an error. So the request is complete, there's no data, but this would just continuously show. So that's why we have this else if. So now back to our if there's data, we want to display that. So you can display it any way you want. Here I'm simply going to return a column with children, and then inside of here I'm going to simply have a list of text widgets and just display each data. So I'm going to say snapshot.data.id, and this is giving us an error because this is a type integer. So as you see, type int cannot be assigned to the parameter type string, so we need to add .toString, just like that. And then next we have text snapshot.data.title, and there's no error there because that is already a string. And then we have content, and finally we have author. So this should display the ID, the title, the content, and the author of that post on the screen here. Okay, so in the terminal, I'm going to do a hot restart with Shift R, and let's see what we get. There we go. So as you see, we have the ID, we have the title, we have the content, and we have the author. Now, obviously, you could display that a little better. As you see, it's towards the top of the screen, but this is fine for our sakes. So that's how you get an individual post. Well, what if you want an entire list? Let's look at how to do that now. So this is the data that we get when we request one individual post. Well, if we go to the post list, you'll notice that this data is actually formatted a little differently. So let's grab this in JSON. Let's copy this. So you'll notice that this data is structured differently. We have the opening and closing braces like that, and we have this stuff here, which this, for the individual post, was the data that we wanted. But now you'll notice that the data that we want for all the posts is included in this results list because we have that bracket there. So this is actually a list inside of the JSON. So we need to access this data a little differently. So what we're going to do, we're going to make a request to this JSON. We are going to have a class to store these three things here. So we'll have int count, string next, string previous, and then we will have a list of results. And then this will point to another class that will hold the data in here. And then we can iterate over that list, add it to our Dart object, and then display it. So it will require a couple extra steps and a little extra effort, but the principle of doing it is the same as getting one post. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is this class post right here. This class post is still corresponding to each individual post. So we still have the ID, the title, the content, and the author. So this is all good. So we're not going to do anything to the contents of the class. All we're going to do is simply rename this from post to result. So let's rename symbol, and we can say result. Now that renames all of this, and we're just renaming that because this is like the results list. Next, I'm going to come above here, and now we're going to make a class. We're going to call this one class post. And this class will have these variables as well as this list. So we'll have final int count, final string next, final string previous, and here's where it's a little different. We have a list, so final list of type result, and we'll call this posts. So just like that, and like here, we also need a constructor, so we'll say post, pass in each one, this dot count, don't forget that needs to be inside of those. Okay, perfect. Now, just like the result class, we need factory post dot from JSON, and we can map string comma dynamic JSON, and then we're going to also return post, and we have count equal to JSON count. And don't forget that. Okay, perfect. So we do need one step to do that with posts. So we can't actually say post semicolon JSON post because we need to, because it's a list. So we have to come at this a little differently. So what we can do is underneath here, we can say var list is equal to JSON results. So equal to this here as list. So explicitly say that is a list. And then we can say list of type result, results list is equal to list dot map I arrow result dot from JSON I dot to list. So this will map each item in here that we have to this list here. And then all we're going to do down here is say posts colon results list, just like that. So now we can move down here. This is all the same. We still have our future post equals fetch post method. We still have this up here, although the only change we need to make here is now this is not type result, right? This is type post. We're going to have to change that a couple different times. So we're going to have to go up here, and in the future up here we also need to change that and change it here. And last change right here, change that. So now, as you see when we did that, we're now getting an error here because we can't access the data that way. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come underneath here where the if snapshot has data, and I'm going to say list post, and we'll call this posts is equal to list post, just like that. And now what we can do is we can create a loop that will loop through each post and add it to this list. So we can say for int I is equal to 0, I is less than, and we have the count, remember, so we can say snapshot.data.count. So go through all the posts, and then we'll say I plus plus, increment by 1. And then inside of here, we want to add to that list. So we can say post.add. We want to add the post, and as you can see, we have this post right here, and then this will be the result class. Now we can access each element here. So we can say ID is equal to snapshot.data.post, and we have sub I dot, and now we can access the ID just like that. And this I will correspond to this I here, so whatever post we are on. And this is a list, remember, so we need to do that, and then we can put the result in here, just like that. Format that up, add some commas. Okay, there we go. And now we can add each of the other things that we want. So we want the title, okay, just like that. So now what we could do is we could come down here and we could return. Now at this point you could print out data for the posts here, but an easier way to do it is to create a widget for one post and then map each post in here to that widget. So that will allow us to write less code and it will look a little cleaner. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to simply say widget, and I'm going to name this post template. And then here we're going to pass in the post, just like that. Now we can define a widget and map each post to it. So inside of here, you can do whatever you want to display it. I'm going to simply return a card, and I'm going to speed this up a little bit because this is just kind of formatting. Okay, there we go. So I finished this post template. As you can see, like I said, I just returned a card, and then this is just some styling that I added, kind of arbitrary, and then so the important part here is really these items here, wherever you see post. So as you see, this is a text widget, and I'm printing out the post.title. So up here, we'll access the post element using the map function. So this will just print out the title of the post that we are currently on in this text. So all I'm doing here is printing out the title, the content, and the author of each post. And then for the author, I'm simply adding this posted by text before it, just so it looks a little nicer. So that's all I'm really doing here. Okay, so back up here, all we are going to do is right here, instead of returning a column, I am going to return a list view, just like that. So inside of this list view, we are going to use the map function that I talked about. So we can say posts, which is the post list right up here that has all of the data, dot, we can say map, and I'm going to change this E to posts. So this is each individual post inside of it. And what we're going to do is map that to the post template. So we'll say post template, and then it will be the post dot posts sub 0 dot, and then see, you can access each one here, and we don't have to do that up here because we are doing that here. We are saying dot title, dot content, and so on, using the passed in post. So instead we're going to go out here and we're simply going to say dot to list, just like that. And that is all we need. And so that's the correct line, but don't forget to add children, just like that. Otherwise, you will get an error. So this is the finished product. This will map each post in our post list to this post template, which is a card, and it will return them in this list view in our app. So before I run it, this is the finished code. You can find the link in the description to the GitHub repo that will have all this code. And now if I come down here and I do a hot reload, you should see over here on the left, there you go. So we are now grabbing all of the blog posts from the API using our HTTP request and displaying them in cards, just like that. So I hope you learned something from this video. If you did, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel. And I look forward to posting more videos like this, especially relating to Flutter app development in the future.